Good morning. Welcome to the Growth, Infrastructure and Waste Committee for the 28th of November 2023. And I can see all councillors are in attendance. Good morning to you all. There are no councillor apologies, so I'll move straight on to the acknowledgement of country. Ipswich City Council respectfully acknowledges the traditional owners as custodians of the land and the waters that we share. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging as the keepers of the traditions, customs, cultures and stories of a proud people. I'll now call for any declarations of interest in the matters on the agenda today. There are none. Thank you. We'll go on to item 1, which is Business Outstanding, which is an update report on a response to a petition request for sound barriers. And this petition came from residents in Brisbane City Council in the areas of Moggill and Bellbarry. And this petition was presented to Council on the 25th of August 2022, and this is a report provided to update this. May I ask for the relevant council officer to come to the lectern, please?
Good morning, Mayor and Councillors. Brett Davey, General Manager, Planning and Regulatory Services.
Thank you, Mr Davey. Thank you very much for this report. And I know in my many conversations with you since August and even before that, that you've been very hands-on with the residents here as well. But how long has this particular area been zoned and used for industrial uses?
In the order of 30 years formally, but before that there has been industrial activity since the late 1800s in this location. Admittedly, parts of the site were grassed and the areas that were probably visible from some of these residential areas were grassed, but certainly the southern end of the precinct was pretty intensively used, including efforts during the war. So there were a number of hangars and those sorts of things built in that area. So there's a lot of industrial activity over an extended period of time. Including,
I think, the railways and...
The railways have been there for a long time. There's a mines testing and research centre that's been there, and there was a tannery many, many years ago. But there has been a variety of activities there, and planning schemes, consecutive planning schemes have identified this area for industrial growth for a long time. And importantly, that industrial growth could have been quite intensive in terms of manufacturing activities. So the outcome of the majority of the development there is now a logistics style of development rather than heavy manufacturing. So in a way, the actual outcome there is a bit less intensive than what the planning scheme had envisaged.
Okay, thank you. Now, I believe that businesses at Redbank Motorway Estate have undertaken many actions or improvements to address the concerns of the Moggill residents. Can you outline some of those examples, please? Yes,
so this industrial estate, there are parts of it that are privately owned, but a fair proportion of it in the northern part of the estate is owned by Goodman. The operating model for Goodman is largely that they own and have tenants occupy premises. So Goodman have developed land for and buildings for different users. So, for example, Australia Post has moved in. One of the main focuses over the last 14 months or so has been to get the community, the developer and the occupants of some of the facilities to talk. The core achievement has been in getting Australia Post to essentially address some of the issues that were occurring on the site. So for context, Australia Post are a logistics facility. They have their own fleet of vehicles and they also have subcontractors which have their own fleet of vehicles. Some of those subcontractors work for businesses that actually mandate tonal beepers as a safety device. And there were a number of facilities on the site that also had some tonal beepers. So Australia Post have heard the concerns of the community. They've worked with Goodman and the community to reduce the fleet that is utilised on site to remove tonal beepers. They've also removed tonal beepers from the internal machinery and plant, and they've actually installed an active monitoring system on that facility so that in the event of a complaint, they can actually isolate what the source of the noise is. And they've also provided a contact to the community for a complaint, and that open offer is there for a senior leader at Australia Post to intervene if there's a problem. Okay. So that's one example, but there are other examples of engagement.
based on, obviously, council has done noise monitoring there as part of this, and I believe even gone into the Brisbane Council area as well, we've done noise monitoring. Is there any evidence to support the construction of an acoustic barrier?
No. So we reviewed all of the acoustic studies that were prepared to support each application, and each of those have their own mitigation recommendations. Some of those are operational in terms of the way the business operates or hours, but there are also recommendations in there about certain plant and equipment to be designed. There isn't a recommendation in any of them to suggest an acoustic barrier external to the individual facilities is required. And for context, the acoustic barrier that's referenced in the petition would be quite significant in terms of its length. So it essentially would be the perimeter of the premises against the river between the road and the river interface. The height of such a barrier is unknown, and from discussion with the residents, they believe that the barrier would solve most of their issues and that it would also help with light spill. There are a couple, aside from operational sites, there are a couple of other issues the residents are raising, and that is construction and tonal beepers and noise associated with construction. Construction activities that's currently occurring is nearing its end. There are very limited sites left on that side of the peninsula that are yet to be developed. So that will resolve itself to an extent.
I note too, because I read all the emails from this group of residents, they also made the complaint that when council was doing its normal maintenance of the parkland there and the riverbank, that they were complaining about the noise of the mowers and things like that. Are there any local laws, or what's the process for us there?
No, there's not, and I think that there were a series of complaints about that. There were a combination of issues there. One was the noise, and there was also fear that the vegetation that was being established or had been established on the riverbank was going to be removed for some purpose. Once the community found out that it was a council project, they were fine, but their initial panic was significant, that they were worried that the vegetation was going to be removed, and they were concerned about the level of noise as well. But once they understood it was maintenance activity and not going to be clearing of vegetation, they were more understanding. Yep.
Now, with the communications, most of the issues have been with the tonal beepers. So noting that the reversing beepers are exempt from the Environmental Protection Act, which typically regulates noise issues, what would be the appropriate revenue for residents to raise their objections on this exemption? Yes,
so I've provided the residents with some information about why tonal beepers are exempt from the Environmental Protection Act, and that's because they're a safety device. I've also made a submission to the state to suggest that rather than looking at this as an isolated case of having a tonal beeper ban in Ipswich or in this location, that it's something that should be considered statewide as a consistent approach. I've furnished the residents with a copy of the initial submission I made, and then as part of the regulatory review of the Environmental Protection Act, there was a public consultation phase with that and with the proposed responses by the state. I also furnished the residents with information about that and the ability to make a submission, and I also furnished them with the submission that we made, which included some commentary on these sorts of issues.
So their main point is to go through the state government?
Yes.
Okay. Yep. Thank you. I don't have any other questions of Mr. David. Does anyone else? No? Okay.
Just regarding complaints moving forward, which is a subsection of the report, and thanks for all of the detail and for assisting residents in Moggle for more than a year now. I just wanted to be really clear. Obviously, I'm empathetic and I understand that these residents have genuine concerns, but I'm just, and I just want to be sure that we are sending them in the right direction. The report here mentions that for complaints moving forward, we're kind of recommending a snap, send, solve approach in terms of the way that they interact with council. I'm not sure if you're able to answer this, but does Snap, Send, Solve actually cover some of the complaints that they might be issuing to Ipswich City Council?
Look, I believe it does. I can validate that after and provide some more information when we do a formal response back to the community about the petition. But I believe it does. And in the event that it doesn't, there's certainly the regular avenues. So, and one of the initial problems that we had with this site was some of the residents alleged that when they tried to make a complaint to us about the issue, we would say it's a Brisbane City Council issue. They'd then go to Brisbane City Council and try to make the complaint, and they'd go, the noise is originating from Ipswich, so it's an Ipswich City Council issue, so they'd be bounced back and forth. So we've corrected scripting internally as well to make sure that that doesn't happen, and I've personally checked on that with our contact centre. But yes, that's the idea is that moving forward, we try and regularise a complaints process for this when there are issues, and then we work out what we do with those complaints on a case-by-case basis, including taking relevant compliance action or whatever the pathway is.
Yep. And just noting that the geographical area with which they might be making the complaint from would have to be, they might need to just have a little bit of a crash course in Snap Send Solve, because if the originating complaint is from their premises, it might actually end up getting sent to Brisbane City Council because of the way that Snap Send Solve works.
No, that's a good point, Councillor. I'll have a look at that.
So yeah, just wanted to ask that in that final report we make it really clear those next steps for the residents. The Mayor made comment about the Environmental Protection Act being the overarching legislation with regard to the tonal beepers. So just kind of assisting them in their advocacy moving forward. As recently as yesterday, we received correspondence, both the Mayor and I, from the residents, and they kind of distilled their last and enduring complaints as the tonal beepers. So moving forward on that, I'd like the report to kind of suggest to them what their avenues in that way are. In terms of the Coles generator plant, obviously there's a process that the residents need to go through there, and obviously putting on the record, our thoughts, and it's clearly articulated in the report around the barrier and how that isn't supported by us. There is a genuine willingness from the resident to liaise with state and federal members of Parliament to progress these issues, but I think that we have, a responsibility in this final report to kind of outline what their next steps are, and managing their expectations in the types of complaints that they might be able to push through to Ipswich City Council, noting that if it is a state issue, well, then there's no responsibility there for us. So,
yep. Yeah, agreed. And I received that email as well. So I suppose it goes without saying that the residents aren't satisfied with the outcome of this report. I've talked to them about that. I've provided them with some of the information used to put into the report a couple of weeks ago now. They are aware or are looking at options to pursue this in other ways. Specifically on the Coles energy plant, as a further update to the report, the developer, Goodman, have provided a contact for the residents to touch base with Coles. In respect to specific complaints on the energy plant, council officers have visited both sides of the river, including early in the morning and later in the evening, particularly early in the morning, because that seemed to be the core focus of the complaints, and have not been able to find any evidence of the noise from the plant. We've also reviewed the acoustic report for that particular site and found no particular issues with it. The other update I just wanted to offer up was Goodman had a review of the report. In addition to providing that contact for Coles, they just wanted to flag that there was a complaint regarding one of the illuminated signs on premises, and it was extending into the night. So there was some glow or some light spillage from that sign. So they just want to reinforce the approval limitations on that sign to go off at 11 p.m. And that on the hooning element, whilst that's not a council jurisdiction, Goodman have worked with Coles in particular to install CCTV cameras and signage, and in the event of a hooning complaint, that can be accessed by the police. So my understanding is that issue has significantly reduced over time, probably because of presence, but also maybe some more police intervention.
Thank you. Any other questions, Mr Davey? Thank you, Mr Davey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your work on that. So I'll move recommendations A and B, that the report be received and contents noted, and that council notes that formal correspondence will be provided to the submitters referencing this report. Do I have a seconder for that, Councillor Beckner? Thank you. In speaking to this, I'd like to thank the residents of Moggle Bell Barry for approaching us and having that open dialogue. I'd also like to thank Mr Davey, you and the council's team on many hours working with residents there. I would also like to thank the Redbank Motorway Estate and their tenants for also spending considerable amount of time and having many meetings with residents there as well. I think the businesses there have gone above and beyond to accommodate the concerns of the neighbours across the river. I'd like to note for council that I received a letter yesterday from 2 of the Moggill residents who were stated that they were severely disappointed by the report in front of us, and council referenced this, that they wanted me to table these concerns. So I'll highlight the fact that they have asked for a blanket ban on tonal beepers, which you can see is actually a safety matter and a matter that they need to raise with the state. They are still concerned about the generator at Coles. Again, council have done acoustic reporting. So council has reviewed the acoustic reporting. There were no critical issues with that. And also, I note in the report on page 10 that there is no substantiation of a suggestion of unlawful noise released from the Coles facility or the energy plant. There was observed significant noise impact from the background traffic noise anticipated to be from the Ipswich motorway. And the third was they were wanting an acoustic barrier to be erected. And I'm assuming that residents just seek that and they expect that Ipswich ratepayers to do that on their behalf, even though the acoustic testing has shown that there is no requirement for it. I'd like to say that if you purchase a property next to an area zoned or used for industrial purposes, there is a reasonable assumption you'll be living next to industrial development. The Redbank Peninsula has been zoned and used for industrial purposes for decades. That is what the area has always been used for and continues to be zoned for. The businesses that currently operate the Redbank Motorway Estate do so lawfully and with respect and understanding of their residential neighbours. The businesses at the Redbank Motorway Estate have addressed all reasonable on-site issues within their power to do so and have committed to continuing to do so over the life of the estate, and I thank them for that. They seek to coexist amicably with residents and are asking for the same level of compromise and understanding from their Brisbane neighbours across the river. While I don't foresee this happening anytime soon, I am reluctant to continue to dedicate any more ratepayer-funded resources towards a matter that is likely that can't be resolved by council. And I also encourage the Moggill and Bellbarry residents to raise matters with the proper regulatory authorities if it's the state government. I also encourage them to use Snaps and Solve. So if they do hear a noise that they're concerned with, I encourage them to log it with Snaps and Solve, list it with the City Council so that we can have a log of that as well. So that's a very important thing for us as well. That's what I have to say on the matter. I'll open up for any other comment. There's no other comment. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. It's unanimous and carried. We go to item 2, which is the confirmation of minutes, and I'll move that the minutes of the Growth Infrastructure Waste Committee held on the 9th of November 2023 be confirmed. Do I have a seconder for those? Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. Any errors, omissions, corrections? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. The next matter, item 3, is a matter to be resolved under delegation, so the decision will be made at this committee. And the subject is the Temporary Local Planning Instrument 1 of 2023, Resource Recovery and Waste Activity Regulation. Does anyone have any questions of the relevant council officer on this matter? In that case, I will move recommendations A and B. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ireland. Thank you. I guess in speaking to this, I see that this is a measure that we do while we wait for our draft planning scheme to go through its processes. So I thank the Deputy Premier and the Department for approving this. This will give us this for the TLPI to be in existence while we wait for our draft planning scheme to come into being next year. Any other discussion?
I also
Yes,
just wanted to thank the state for understanding our need for continuity in this space while we await our new planning scheme. It's really important that we have these protections in place. They have been in place for some years, and this is a process of updating and continuously updating, and I look forward to it being included in the new planning scheme so we don't have to associate any resources with the preparation of a TLPI moving forward.
Thank you, Councillor Hooper. Any other discussion? I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. Item 4 is the Waste and Circular Economy Transformation Directive, Policy Directive Program Update. Could I have the relevant council officer to the lectern, please?
Morning, Mayor and Councillors. Brett Davey, Manager Planning and Regulatory Services.
Thank you very much for this report. I know that the organisation, we're also working on an update to this as well. Would you mind just taking us through, in particular, we have, where do you think that we've been most successful in with this policy directive and areas that we need to improve in to get better outcomes for the people of Ipswich?
Yep, thank you, Mayor. I suppose the core, over the last 6 months, the core achievement has been the regulatory review. The Department of Environment and Science committed to having a regulatory review by retired Judge Jones and went to public consultation on that matter. That is a significant opportunity for legislative reform. We made a submission to make some additional suggestions, and that submission's attached. The other big outcome over the last 6 months has been the landfill appeal outcomes. I think they've been discussed previously to the committee, but that is outlined in the report as well. Those are the two core achievements. I suppose also in the last 6 months we've had an elevation, or I suppose the last 12 months an elevation in complaints. The community hosted a meeting in September that we attended. As part of that, we provided some more information to the community, as well as set up a website to assist with providing accurate information to the community on waste matters.
Thank you. Councillor Fichtner?
Just wondering when the Joint Task Force last met.
Excuse me, that was July, I believe, from the report. Yeah, 4th of July.
And the discussions at the Joint Task Force, do they continue to be constructive? Are there new ways of thinking at how we use this collaborative relationship moving forward?
Yes, of course. We've actually prompted a discussion to have some reflective time to consider the limitations or the opportunities associated with the way we interact with the state and the use of the Joint Task Force moving forward. That times perfectly with the review, or our own review of the Waste Directive, to make sure that we're using resources and taking advantage of opportunities that we have before us.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle?
Thank you, Chair.
Microphone. Microphone. Sorry. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Davey, thank you so much for the update. This is a really important piece of work, as you know, and you've worked alongside us in developing it and seeing it evolve. I think a part of my question on notice around the update was about identifying any new initiatives. Those aren't outlined in the report, and I know we've been working and council officers working tirelessly on our new planning scheme. The absence of any new ideas, is that because we are doing everything possible, or is there, you know, at some point where we can allocate time to look at some more strategic or creative thinking around solving the issue?
Yeah, look, you could always do more, I suppose, in many initiatives. The one area of opportunity that I haven't outlined in the report that we could, I think, do more on is looking at incentivisation of improvement of facilities, and that's something we could work on with the state. So obviously there's a focus of compliance and a lot of media on compliance activity and legal action. No one likes investing money in those processes, and that money may be better spent in processes to incentivise facilities to improve their processes, but also to attract new technologies. So that's an area that we haven't spent a lot of time on, but it is something that I've been talking to the state a little bit about.
Yes, but I do note there's been a little bit of discussion lately around incentivising, and I don't know what that looks like, whether it's financial contribution from the state, moving the waste operators to a more compliant, environmentally sound business model. But you see a role in local government in doing that. What could that potentially translate to? Is that development fees, waiver of application fees?
Yeah, all of the above. So it could be in the way we adopt the planning scheme policy, some further amendments to that with the new scheme once it's live. All of that requires testing and engagement with the industry, I suppose, to make sure that levers that we can apply can be effective in fixing the underlying cause of the problems.
Yeah, thank you.
I suppose as another achievement that we must recognise is Council's overall improvement in our resource recovery implementation and delivery. The overall advancement that we've made, if you reflect over the last 2 years, even looking at the FOGO trial and then our work towards that, our planning for new assets, the engagement we're doing with the community on those assets and overall program, that's a significant achievement beyond anything that we probably thought we'd achieve when we started this directive.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr Davey?
Perhaps, Chair, if I could just add to that, just reinforcing what Mr Davey has said in relation to the leadership in the resource recovery, that, yeah, as this council is very aware, has provided a strong leadership role in the strategy work that has been undertaken, the work to develop up the concepts and plans for the 2 new resource recovery centres. Also very proud of the fact that we will be one of the 3 councils partnering to establish the materials recovery facility. So that is all really important work to deliver on the circular economy aspect of the directive, which, as Mr Davey has indicated, that's certainly the opportunity for further improvement for the community. I just want to note that this is the 10th regular update against the directive, and the review is yet to come to Council, and that's where we will present to you the summative achievements that we believe have been delivered under this directive, jointly with the Department of Environment and Science, state government agencies and of course Council. And we will look to identify opportunities as we bring that to you in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Sia. Thank you, Mr Davey.
Thank you.
So I'll move that this report be received and a contents noted. Do I have a second for that? Thank you, Councillor Doyle. In speaking to this, as the CEO said, this is the 10th update. We decided as a council when we first were voted in 2020 to take a strategic approach to how we would deal, one, with our own waste, but secondly, how will we deal with the 42% of the state's waste coming into those 8 privately owned landfills. And we thought, rather than just going in the media and complaining, we thought we'd have a multi-pronged approach. We've worked with RIQ, the waste recycling industry of Queensland, worked with the Department of Environment and Science, and we set out a 10-point plan. So this is a very important plan for us to see how we progress. And I'd like to take the opportunity to highlight some of the key achievements outlined in this update. In particular, I know the hard work Council has done in doing to support those communities that are currently impacted by the waste odour issues, which is approaching nearly 27,000 complaints now since the Odour Abatement Task Force was set up in 2018. The amount of advocacy this advocacy has led to legal action from both Council and the Department of Environment and Science, as well as a request to the state to consider new legislation to better mitigate waste issues in the future. I'm also proud that we've seen some of the wins that we've had against the waste companies seeking to either expand or establish a new landfill in Ipswich. This includes wins against Wanless, Landtrack and Cleanaway, and saw another application from Austin BMI being conditioned, heavily conditioned more appropriately. It's always a tough decision for us to use ratepayers' funds to fight these and pay these legal bills, but I'm proud to see the results we've had so far. I would like to see the joint task force, I guess, become more reinvigorated on how we can work better with the state. And I just note too, one of the items for the policy directive was to have a community of practice with the Waste and Recycling Industry Association of Queensland. That still hasn't occurred, and it's 3 years later. At this stage, there's been a code of practice that's been bounced around, and I've got to say, I think we're dealing with their third CEO in the last 3 years, and they're wanting an MOU to be signed before they will do a code of practice with us. The MOU, as it stands, is something that I personally couldn't sign. There are a few provisions in there I think are unreasonable, so I do call on RIQ to be more reasonable and to continue to work with council in progressing that as a way forward, as a necessary way forward as we come to a cleaner circular economy. I'll open up for any other discussion. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Mayor. Last week the odour was pretty bad through Ripley and Flinders View, and I had 2 complaints about it. And while we're saying that we're doing all we can, I guess for the people that are suffering from the odour and can't go outside their house, they just want the businesses closed down. I know we can't do that, but the residents are not entirely satisfied that enough action's being taken.
I'll concur, Councillor. I don't think enough action's been taken, and we're asking. That's why we're asking the state, as the regulators of environmental compliance, to step up.
But for the 20 years I've been in council, there's been odour and we've never really got on top of it.
Yeah.
But I take your point.
Yeah. Councillor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I had a number of comments to make, but I'll pass on those because you've so very eloquently pointed out all the important work that we've been doing and driving as a group of elected reps since 2020, and I'm really proud of that piece of work, and really grateful to council officers coming on board and really taking on this piece of work and being quite creative in relation to some of the solutions and drivers. I just want to touch on, though, you mentioned, and I think the report mentions that there's been 26,500 complaints via the Department of Environment and Science Odour Abatement Task Force back in November 2020. That only stood at 8,517. So that has increased significantly. And I'm confident that it's as a result of our advocacy and helping residents understand where they need to direct those complaints, so it's a more coordinated response. And we're now seeing the state government taking compliance action. So I think that's a good example of where it has translated to an improved outcome. I agree with Councillor Ireland. Residents, still put up with the odour, so in their mind, not much has changed. But we have had a number of steps taken along the way that I think it's headed to a better outcome.
I think so too. I think the odour has been impacting certain suburbs like Collingwood Park and other for a long time. I mean, I live in Racefield, but it's probably only gotten worse the last 4 years. The waste companies will say it's because of the urban sprawl. My house was built in the 70s, like many houses in Collingwood Park and those other areas too. So it's actually unreasonable. So I guess from my perspective, and when I can speak with residents, those waste companies need to comply with the environmental regulation, their environmental authority that has been given to them by the state government. So we encourage the state government to step up their compliance activities and also to do a public health inquiry.
I'm no environmental scientist, but there is absolutely discussion in the community amongst residents that the extensive development and land clearing and tree clearing, particularly through, Collingwood Park, all the way out to Ripley, that somehow has had an impact on the odour travelling.
Thank you. Any other discussion? No, I think one of the community groups will be giving us a petition soon in regards to the odours as well. I think it may be coming to the December meeting. There's nothing else. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. I think it's unanimous and carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 5, which is the registration of interest engagement for the lease of land to community groups. It's for 12 Mount Juliet Drive, Augustine Heights, and 79 Sierra Drive, Spring Mountain. And the recommendation is that the council commence a formalised expression of interest for those 2 properties. that are dedicated to council for community use under the Springfield Infrastructure Plan. Would anyone like to ask the relevant council officer questions? Yes, we have Councillor Vector and Councillor.
It's probably a question for Brett Davey in the first instance.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Davey to the lectern, please.
Morning.
Mr. Davey, you want to say your name?
Just-
Oh, sorry, Brett
Just-
Davey, General
yeah.
Manager, Planning and Regulatory Services.
Just a quick one for you, Mr. Davey. The wording of the recommendation here references the Springfield Infrastructure Plan. Is that the correct terminology here, or is it in the structure agreement that these parcels of land are actually to be dedicated to community use? I was just flicking through some documents earlier and I noticed that there is mention of it in the structure agreement rather than referring to this document, the Springfield Infrastructure Plan, which I wasn't able to find on council's website.
Yeah, you're correct. It should be Springfield Infrastructure Agreement rather than plan.
I'll note that when I move.
Thanks.
Thank you
yeah.
very much.
Thanks, Mr. Davey.
No problem.
I'll just check, Councillor, do you have questions of Mr. Davey or someone else?
Mr. Davey, thank you. Stay right there.
That's okay.
Just in relation to the 3 parcels that were given for community use under the Springfield Infrastructure Agreement, because the expression of interest has got 12 results back, is there any way to get under the agreement another parcel, since we're going from 3 to 2? Is there a mechanism, because the other one has like nature overlays?
Okay, I don't believe there is. There are further obligations under the infrastructure agreement that haven't been satisfied, so that for future development. And there is some complexity with the Lakes Entrance Drive site, which is the one referred to in the report. I don't necessarily think this report is suggesting that nothing can ever happen on that site. It's just that the other 2 sites are easier opportunities to take advantage of at this present time. So we do need to look at the Lakes Entrance Drive site in a bit more detail and see what opportunities may arise. For example, it might be that there are abilities to develop it and to offset some of the habitat loss, or to do something on that site that's quite sensitive to the habitat that's there.
Noting that topography is really difficult there as well.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
We can certainly take that issue on notice as well, to review that site and the background in terms of its acquisition and whether there was some additional planning done at that time.
Okay, amazing, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. I think Councillor Tully has, Mr. Davey, I think Councillor Tully has a
possibly
question.
for you or someone else. I'm just looking at the plan, like depicting lot 12 on page 71 of 124 that we have. I don't know if we can bring that up on the screen. I've just got a query about lot 12 to start with. That is, there's a major gully line through that property, and that was why Queensland Fire Service rejected that as the site of their fire station. Who would be responsible for filling that gully? Would it be one of the people or one of the organisations that might be successful?
It depends on the model of delivery moving forward. So whether or not it's a asset that we build for another organisation or it's a joint delivery.
Or they could deliver it?
Yeah, through the expression of interest process, and this may be something that property might be better off answering, but there might be a range of solutions involved in offering these sites up for community use, and some of those models might be that we are joint together in delivering an asset. Obviously, the fit for purpose works would all be up for negotiation with whatever that model is.
All right. Now, just moving on quickly, the adjoining properties, 22 and 18. Number 18, that's the one towards the bottom there. Is that a landlocked property?
I'd have to double check to see if there was an easement connection there. but I could take that on notice to get back to you on if you'd like.
Thank you.
Mr. David, we could ask, obviously there's I think it's a confidential attachment. I'm not sure. But there's a number of organisations who've registered interest, which are, some of them are church groups and multicultural groups. As part of the EOI, will they have to show some benefit to the greater community, as it'll be open up to not just their church or not just their multicultural community? How will that be managed?
I'm not entirely sure. That might be a question for Mel Dower.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Davey.
Thank you.
Awesome. Ms. Dower?
Good morning, Melissa Dower, Community Services Manager.
Thank you, Ms. Dow. We saw the expressions of interest, a lot of them were other church groups and multicultural groups. How will we ensure that, because it is council land, that it's just not locked to one segment of the community? How do we make sure it's an open community resource?
Yeah. So I might just take you back to when we started this registration of interest. It was because we were often getting asked about, having single-use facilities, and we're starting to really embed a multi-use facility across the city. And when we're working with our community centres and groups, we're looking at how that can be multi-use. So in regards to your question, we did get a large interest in community facility, multicultural groups who did suggest that it would be quite inclusive and open to all. But in reference to the next steps, we would have a formalised process. So in regards to what the guidelines and conditions would be within that formalised, they would have to demonstrate a strong interest in meeting the needs of the wider community and delivering on services that meet the needs within Springfield.
Thank you, Ms. Dow. Any other questions for Ms. Dow? Thank you. So I'll move the recommendation there, noting a change from the last word being planned to agreement. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. I'll open up for now for discussion. Councillor Johnick, I think Councillor Johnick was first.
Thank you, Chair. Just noting the really positive number of applicants that come through under that expression of interest, having 12. And it shows a real need for these facilities in our division. So just wanted to thank those community groups for putting the effort in and showing their interest.
Thank you, Councillor Johnick. Councillor Tully?
Yeah, I'm highly supportive of this moving forward. Obviously, it'll take some time, but that's a good indication from the community that there is interest in the utilisation of this site for the community, not only in Augustin Heights where it's physically located, but in that Springfield region. Could I just ask the CEO, at the start of this report, there's no indication that there's anything confidential in this report, so all of the information, I take it, is public?
I noticed that too. I thought it was a confidential list, but
Well,
it's
yeah,
not.
Normally it's flagged on the front page
Yeah.
of the agenda that there's confidential material
Yeah,
within.
no, it's all public.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? Put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We'll now move to item 6, which is the Asset Infrastructure Services Department Capital Delivery Report, September 2023. And could I ask for the General Manager for that area to come to lectern, please?
Good morning, Mayor, councillors. Matt Anderson, General Manager of Assets and Infrastructure Services Department.
Thank you, Mr. Anna. Thank you very much for the report too. I especially enjoy the portfolio update, always showing how things are going. When I look at the table on page 79, which is the Asset and Infrastructure Service Department capital portfolio by month, and I can see that our actuals are far higher than last financial year's actuals. So I'm asking, how were you able to get such a high performance, and is it possible to continue that through the year, because we've got quite a strong capital works program, especially with all the flood recovery stuff?
Absolutely. The team is certainly delivering to a high level at the moment, but I think one of the key elements here to understand is that the level of performance and certainly the level of spend is driven by a number of key items. One at the moment is the significant cost escalations that we're seeing across the entire industry, and that's certainly being experienced across all LGAs. Conversations quite recently indicate that LGAs are looking at planning for up to 30% price escalations in project delivery over the next 12 months. The other item for us as a key driver is the delivery of a significant number of projects which were carried across from last financial year, and they have now been completed, and so we don't expect that the escalation in terms of the overspend or overperformance will carry on in a similar level for the next 12 months.
So the delivery levels are more based on the cost increase.
Yes, that is the
than
case.
delivering more roads and footpaths.
Correct. Having said that, current level of performance in terms of delivery of actual projects on the ground is at a very, very high level.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Any other questions of Mr. Anderson? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll move that the report on the capital delivery by the Asset Infrastructure Services Department be received and contents noted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any discussion, I guess, in moving this? I do note our constant look at the bottom line. We can see that other levels of government are suffering from the cost increases. We saw recently with the federal government having to, I guess, trim their infrastructure plan to the budget they have. And we saw recently too with the increases to the cost to Cross River Rail and the Gold Coast Fast Rail. So, we have to ensure that we are doing the right thing by ratepayers' money. So I thank the team there for managing that and maintaining that.
I just want to note through you, Chair, that although this is the capital delivery report and what's happening on the ground out there in terms of the projects that we're undertaking and have undertaken, there's a really important piece of work in the Emerging Asset Management Program, which sits beside this, which informs all of our discussions moving forward in budget. We continue to unpack and understand our obligations and the conditions of the assets right across the city. So I just want to acknowledge that, yes, although we're seeing price escalations here, we understand that, maybe by the end of the financial year, we might not be able to complete all of the works that have been committed to. However, we'll continue to inform the way that we spend our money, particularly in the asset rehabilitation space, by getting better and more nuanced in our understanding as a council.
I agree. Thank you, Councillor Fichtner. There's no other discussion. I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour? I think it's unanimous and carried. Item 7 is the exercise of delegation report. Does anyone have any questions of the relevant council officer on this report? Know that I move that the exercise of delegation report for the period 18th of October 2023 to 14th of November 2023 be received and contents noted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Kunzelman. Any discussion? No, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. We'll move on now to item 8. And does anyone have the Planning and Environment Court Action Status Report? Does anyone have any questions? The relevant council officer. Councillor Tully has some questions. I ask for the relevant council officer to come to the lectern.
Good morning, Anthony Bowles, Acting Development Planning Manager.
Thank you. Councillor Tully.
Good morning. It's just one matter which was resolved by the Court of Appeal last Friday in dismissing the appeal by Spring Lake Holdings. Can you just give us I found that a significant decision. Could you just update that and where to from now?
Yes, that was a significant decision. It was consistent with a lot of our views when we were making our decision-making process well before the appeal occurred. Essentially the next step is that the substantial aspect of the matter, the resolution of the dispute, is now returned to the Planning Environment Court for decision. So that part of the appeal and the appeal of the original decision was the jurisdictional matter. So there is still a possibility that the matter could be elevated to a higher court if there was disagreement about the judgment. so that there is still time for that to occur. If not, the original matter progresses through the Planning Environment Court. So there is still yet to be substantial orders made on that, and there will certainly be an update in the next report about the progress of that matter.
So this was a deemed refusal, so what you're saying, it's still in the Planning Environment Court now for a decision on the merits of the case?
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
So the jurisdictional matter was whether or not the Planning Environment Court had the powers to hear the matter, rather than the Springfield, the resolution process under the structure plan.
Well, I can't see this going to the High Court, but you never know.
But well, I didn't think it'd become appeal either.
Through the mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ireland.
Just while Mr Bowles is there, in Division 1, the first one for Siddons Road, is there an outcome on that? It was listed for review on the 22nd of November.
There is a further review listed on the 8th of December.
Okay.
So there's still, without prejudice, discussions occurring.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of Mr Bowles? No? Thank you very much. Mr.
Thank you.
Bowles. Thank you. So I'll move that the Planning Environment Court Action Status Report be received and the contents noted. Do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Tully. I'll open up for discussion. There being no discussion, I'll put the matter to the vote. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. I have no notices of motion, no matters arising or procedural motions for formal matters. It's 9:52, so I'll actually move that we'll start looking at the chair of the GTC. I might as well take the morning tea break now rather than start and stop, if that's okay. So we'll come back in 30 minutes, which will be 10:22. If I may.
Just before you move that, Mayor,
Yeah. Or 10:30.
was there an opportunity for us to potentially have a group photo? Was that not going to take place after this?
Okay, so
Committee.
I'll move that. I guess the GTC will start at 10:30. Is that okay? Thank you very much. Got to have a vote on that, if everyone's happy with that. Thank you. It's unanimous and carried. So I'll close the meeting now at 9:53. Thank you.